Welcome to Tail Learn Code. Here there will be tales about software development, learning from each other, code to build solutions. And now your host, Chad Green.
All right, awesome. Welcome, everyone. Hope everyone's been having a wonderful day. Today, as you see, we've got Dorrin joining us. So really looking forward to this. Like I've been talking this week, this is actually the third interview of the week, and this has been more, interviewing folks who do things outside of the world I normally live in. Right, so I live in the Microsoft world. Like the last two people were Java developers, and of course you're more on the security side of everything, and more on that side of everything. But so welcome. I'm really glad you joined us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So why don't we start with quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Dorrin. I have been living in Louisville for 10 years. I've migrated from Iran, actually. So Louisville is the first place I came to because my dad was living here, and I just settled in Louisville. Usually when I say that, people ask, how do you like it? I do like it a lot here, obviously. A little bit different than what I'm used to. I come from a big city, and Louisville is a big city, but it doesn't have the, you have to drive everywhere and things like that. Especially now that I live in suburbs. But I still like it. I went to Sweet School for computer engineering, computer science. After I got my degree, I worked at GE Appliances right here in Louisville. I worked then briefly at GE Corporate in Fairfield, Connecticut at their headquarters. And then after that, I just thought that I needed a taste of startups. I was a little bit bored with corporate life. I wanted to see something different. I asked around from my mentors, and they said, you just have to try startups and see if you like those. So I didn't have a lot of prior experience. So it was kind of hard to find a job in the field that I wanted. And the field that I wanted was I wanted to be a DevOps engineer. Mm-hmm. That field is very experience-based. Usually you can't get that experience other than just actually doing the work. So it was actually on the Louisville Tech Slack that we have, was that I found a job at El Toro, which is a startup downtown Louisville. And I worked there for about a year. I did quite like the startup life. And I thought that there wasn't any better time to do this. I'm young. I don't have a lot of responsibilities. I didn't have a mortgage yet at the time. So I was like, it's the best time to, do these kind of things. And I worked there for about a year. And then after that, I wanted to work for a slightly bigger company. So I started looking, and I wanted to work remotely. So I started looking around, and I was fortunate enough to get an offer from Auth0. It's an authentication as a service company based out of Bellevue, Washington. And it was very great working remotely for 2.5 years for an introvert like me. I like staying at home with my laptop and having to. I was very intrigued by the challenge of having to keep a system up and running for 24/7 all the time, because authentication can never be down. And I knew I was going for a difficult job because the company was small at the time, so it was only 200 people, so we had to be on call a lot, and for a lot of things. My official title was infrastructure engineer, but I did a lot of different things. My team did so many things. We nitty-gritty details of databases and having to, set databases schemas up and being on call for it and getting paged at 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm grateful for that experience. I think that set me up for success. Eventually, the company got bigger. I think it's 700, 800 people now. And the responsibilities shrunk down because they had more people to hire.
That's good. Yeah.
Got more structure. So, and I did have a great time there. But then after 2.5 years, I thought that I want something totally different. I want to look for another job, and I started interviewing at different companies, and I ended up at AWS. It's been a dream to work for AWS. I've always been a fan of their technology, obviously. So it was very exciting to work at AWS, and I've been working here for around 4 months now. So yeah, that's my long intro.
Oh no, that's cool. So, and what are you doing at AWS?
I am a solutions architect at
Okay.
AWS. So when I was looking for jobs, I wanted something that would challenge me, obviously, and I wanted something a little bit different. All the DevOps engineer, infrastructure, whatever you want to call it, roles, were kind of similar in a way, and I didn't want to repeat my experience. At the same time, I wanted to do a work where I guide people. That's what I always became interested in, into making great decisions, architecting distributed systems. And at the same time, I wanted to exercise my leadership skills. Like I wanted to have a platform where I'm encouraged. Not that I wasn't encouraged at my previous job; it was just not a part of my role.
Right.
That I'm encouraged to make leadership decisions, and that's why I thought this would be a good role for me. And so far, it's been good. What solutions architect at AWS do is that they guide. They're basically customers guided technical person. So they're part of a larger account team that each customer has. So depending on the size of the company and all, you would have an account manager. And as part of your account manager team, you also will get a solutions architect. And you can utilize this solutions architect as a free resource. So it comes at a no cost to companies to basically guide you. If you have any questions, you want to set up a call with them to say, hey, I want to do containers. I have no idea where to start. Or I'm building this architecture. I have no idea if it's good or bad. What are the best practices? So solutions architect can guide you through that. They're not hands-on keyboard kind of resource. We have a different branch for that. It's AWS Professional Services. But they are still direct. Solutions architects are there as a free resource to help you kind of like go through your AWS journey, whatever type of journey you would have. Some people have, migration journeys from data centers to AWS. Some people want to do modernization, and so on and so forth.
Cool. And then, are you focused on a particular set of AWS products or AWS in general?
It's just all of them. Like that's one part of the job that is challenging, is to keep up with everything that AWS comes out all the time. It's even hard for us. So I have a lot of empathy for customers who don't know what choices to make. I have a customer who was like, I have no idea what to do with containers. Like I don't know which one to choose. And it can be a bit daunting, these things. So, part of our job is to be the expert of the platform. So it's all of the services. It's from the compute services to all of the storage services, serverless, containers, networking, and all that. So all of them. You do have solutions architect that focus on one particular. So those are specialized solutions architect. So those solutions architect will focus on, for example, networking. And those usually come and help when we have a customer who wants to have like a setup between their data center and AWS, and you need additional expertise to guide them through it. That's where the specialized solutions architect come in. But I'm a generalist, so I have to be an expert in all the services.
Right. No, yeah, because so I've dealt with basically your equivalent on Azure, and usually I am talking to a journalist who's all over the place. Although I'm also, as a Microsoft MVP, I also have the opportunity to talk to the product teams, which is really nice. I'm curious, because again, I work in on the Microsoft side of it. Does like AWS have something like the Microsoft MVP program? Do you know what the MVP program is? I mean,
is that like when you directly talk to product teams?
so all right, so the MVP, which is most valuable professional, right? Is Microsoft's. It's their reward to give to people who do a lot in the community, who are speaking or writing documentation or writing books, whatever it is. The goal is actually for people who are doing it on their own time, right, as opposed to like paid people to join it. And some of the benefits, like for example, I have direct communication with the product teams, right? So I have access to email lists that that they're all NDA. Plus, like I can attend sessions that are giving us previews of what's going to come out, right? That the Microsoft's working on. I was curious, does AWS have anything like that?
Yeah, AWS has, I believe it's called AWS Heroes.
Okay.
So those are community heroes. As for if they have access to product teams, I'm not sure if they do. But usually, if you have an account with AWS and an account manager and a solutions architect, those people can will be your communication line between you and the product team.
Oh yeah, it's not like you have to have an MVP on your team to get access into everything, but it does help.
Yeah.
And again, because of Microsoft's philosophy is, they reward the MVPs for a reason, because you actually do have to be picked by the product teams, right? I mean, so you're the way how they do their voting for it. Now, with that being said, we don't know what the actual number is. There's somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 MVPs across the world, but it's not just Azure, right? It's all the Microsoft products. To include, I don't know if they still have them, but they used to have like MVPs for Xbox, right? So any product that Microsoft has, they can have an MVP for. So actually, the ones I've met that have been the most interesting are the PowerPoint MVPs. Because they actually, if you're really interested in improving your presentation skills, that's what they do, right? That's their whole thing, and it's pretty cool because I've met some of those. But also, you talked about how you went to speed school and everything, and for those watching who don't know speed school, so speed school is the engineering school at U of L, right? And actually is one of the top engineering schools in the country at the very least. It's actually it's actually not easy to get into. It says something about you, right? I know plenty of people who could not get in speed school. But what sparked your interest in technology? Why, especially, sure enough, you're not the normal person working in technology. You're not a white male, what sparked your interest in technology?
So when I was younger, about 9 years old, my mom made a point to get us a computer because she said that in the future, if you don't have knowledge of how to use a computer, you will be out of a job. I don't know how she had that insight, but she saw into the future, as moms do, and bought us a computer. And I remember going with my mom to pick it up. I had no idea what a computer was. And when we went to pick it up, I just fell in love with how it looked. I was so intrigued by this box. Mm-hmm. And I remember we lived in a big city. We didn't have a car. We had to get a taxi to drive back home. And I was holding it like this so carefully so it doesn't fall. And when we came home, the computer was supposed to be for the whole family, but I kind of dominated the whole usage of it. Like I was at it all the time. That's when I decided I wanted to be in front of this thing forever. And it came with Windows 95. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I don't know if that's the case now, there was no translation to my language that I speak. Farsi is the language. And I did not know a word of English. I actually didn't know what the English alphabet looked like. I was only 9. So my sister tried to teach me the English alphabet, but I was not really interested. I was like, oh, that looks too different from ours. And it does. We even write from right to left, and English writes this way and all that. But I just learned English just clicking around on this computer, and I broke it many times. And we had to haul it back and get it fixed by the person who built it, and then come back and then after a year, I got access to internet. We had an external modem, and so that was like a whole new world opened. And I'm grateful for that because my English improved so much.
Right.
And also my interest in computers. My interest changed in different areas of computers. There was a time where I was extremely interested in I was also very interested in math. Like I was very interested in discrete mathematics and set theory and things like that. And I wanted to align my work with computers to be that way, a kind of more academia kind of style. And then later on, when I started in speed school, I was part of our cyber defense team, which I've made many great friends out of that team as well. And I became interested in security, and that's what I wanted to do for a long time. And then after that, I worked at GE Appliances on their cloud team, and I was like, oh, I actually like this thing because I felt like working on cloud and the whole DevOps engineering and all that touched all the areas. You know, it was compute, it was storage, it was doing ops, it was writing code, it was everything full stack that I wanted to be and have control over. So that's how I decided to, come to this field. And I think that was a great decision. I think, well, I think security is also a great subfield and all that. And security is still part of my job, a part of everyone's job. But I'm very happy with that direction that my career took. I think it's been great.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear. And sure enough, I mean, maybe take a moment to explain. So I think a lot of people, and I'm not going to get into the politics or everything, but I think a lot of people are misunderstood about how Iran is. I mean, my understanding is Iran is actually number one, it's very young, right? I know there's more young people than older people there, but it's extremely educated background. So it's funny because what made me think about that was, you talked about getting a computer when you're young, and I bet some people might be thinking, oh, well, that's probably really unique. But I mean, how unique was that? I mean, still, it was not a long time ago. You're not that old, but I mean, still, it was long enough ago that still not that many people had computers in the house, even here in Americas. But I mean, was it really unique to have a computer in your house at that point, or was it starting to pick up at that point?
I think like when social networking didn't exist and internet was not a thing everyone knew about or were interested in, Iran was actually kind of behind in technology that I'm sure of from other countries. Like if it was normalized for other people to have laptops at home or multiple laptops at home and be able to purchase them at a reasonable price, that would be Iran's next 5 years. So Iran was like a couple of years behind. I think it became a norm. It was not necessarily the norm that I had a computer at 9. It was just the fact that my mom herself was interested in learning,
Right.
And have us, learn what a computer is. But when I started going to middle school a couple of years later, most middle class families had a computer as well, but it was just that it was sitting in the living room.
Right.
For like a family thing for everyone to use. People didn't have personal computers. Nowadays, all my friends back home have Instagram and all these, Facebook, and they have iPhones. Even though those are pretty expensive to buy and all that, but people have it. People use it. They're very active. They're more active than me on social media. Um, and I think that's good in a lot of ways. But also that I had my difficulties dealing with internet back home. Initially, it was just fine. You could access any website.
Mhm.
And then after a couple of years, it started getting less and less accessible. So what Iran does, like many other countries like China and Russia that do this, is that it block websites,
Right.
so you can't access them. So that became a thing that you had to deal with. So and the internet speed was very slow. I was using dial-up, obviously, and when I was leaving, I was about like 16, 17. Dial-up was not a thing anymore. Like DSL and all that started showing up and services that would do it for you. But my mom was not interested in paying for it.
Mhm.
And because she was like, you have to study instead of being on this computer all the time. So she was not interested in putting more resources towards computers. And by the end of that year, was it 2009, I think, we knew that we were leaving, so there wasn't any point in me, um, trying to buy anything new for the computer. By the way, I kept this computer since I was 9 until I was 17. So I kept it and I changed the monitor a couple of times,
Mhm.
and my mouse and keyboard, but I just had this very slow computer. Um, and I was fortunate that when I came to US, it was around Christmas, so it was very beautiful. We don't have Christmas decorations and back home, and it doesn't snow that much. Um, it was nice to see the houses. Like we used to live in Old Louisville, and it looked like the scene from Home Alone that you see in the movies. Uh, so, just came in during Christmas and we reunited with my dad, and he was very excited to spoil us. So,
Oh yeah.
he bought us a lot of gifts. I've never seen that many gifts under a Christmas tree. Doesn't happen anymore because I'm like grown up now. But I got a laptop finally, and that was the thing I always wanted when I was back home. I wanted a laptop, but my mom just kind of implied that she doesn't want to spend the money,
Right.
and money was like a problem. Like laptops were very expensive, and I had a laptop, and it was not, one of those. It wasn't anything interesting. It was like a Dell laptop that you just go and Best Buy and pick the cheapest one because
Mhm.
I know that's how my dad shops. He doesn't do online shopping really. Um, and but I was very grateful for that. It was so crazy to browse the internet unlimited. Like I was used to seeing there's a blocked page shows if a website is blocked, and I was used to seeing that. And the way to get around that was to use VPN and all sorts of things. So I had to get myself familiarized with concepts of VPN and what are those when I was 12. And I didn't have to do this here. Everything was
Right.
extremely accessible, extremely fast. I could not believe how fast the web pages loaded. But yeah, so people have their perceptions of Iran based on what you see on the news. Some of it is right, some of it is wrong. It's generally, I come from Tehran, it's the capital of Iran. It's generally a modern place.
Mhm.
We don't ride on camels or anything like that. We have cars. But yeah, so you know, it is modern, but also very different than US, and I'm definitely happy to be here for sure. Well, also, I'm proud of being, having a rich history of Iran and everything, but also happy to be in the US as well.
Oh yeah. And I mean, and sure enough, I mean, politics nowadays, sometimes people want you to lose that identity, but I always tell them, don't lose that identity, right? I mean, it's, so my wife's from the Philippines. And now my daughter she's been to the Philippines, but she's always born here and everything. But, you know, I always try to emphasize she should understand her Filipino culture as much as she understands her American culture. Although it's funny again because she's grown up here the whole time, and I remember like her freshman or sophomore year in college, and they had signs up for Asian Pacific Month, and I'm like, oh, are you going to do anything for that? She's like, why would I do that? I'm like, because you're half Asian Pacific, right? Don't you realize that? It's like, oh yeah, I forgot.
It's a process, I think, like, and everyone I think goes through, especially if you're young and have like these dual identities. And when I first came here, I was not interested to hear anymore about my country. I was ready to immerse myself in the American culture.
Right.
I was ready to be part of, United States, and just completely ignored like, anything related to, my country. I was not interested in the food. I was like, I have tried Iranian food so many times. I want to have American food, like ranch dressing and cheeseburgers and stuff like that. So I was very excited to just be part of the United States. I always wanted to come here. And I think it was good because it made me kind of like make that connection with the US. But after, 10 years, I've started going back and actually reading about the history of my country, politics aside, like, the country is really old. So like way back history.
Really not many other countries that are older than Iran. I mean, it's.
Yeah. Yeah. And realizing how much I didn't know, how much I've ignored, even like trying to make food. Like I don't actually know how to make Persian food really. But I know how to make French pastry somehow. Why is that? Yeah, so trying to go back to my roots a little bit. Oh
no.
And I think it's a process that happens to everyone. I have family members who were born here, and until they were 15 or 16, they kind of ignored their Iranian identity, and they didn't want to learn the language. They wanted nothing to do with it. But then they grow up and they're like, actually, I do want to learn the language. I do want to be. I want this to be part of my identity. So I don't know what goes on there, but it happens. It happens to a lot of people. Usually, when we grow up, we just kind of find those connections, I guess.
I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, when you're a kid, I mean, you're around most people who are not, right? I mean, I'm not actually sure, but is there a large Iranian or Persian population here in the Louisville area?
I don't think it's.
I mean, I'm not aware of that, but again, I don't live in that community. I'm not in that community.
I know a few Iranians here in Louisville. I know my dad probably knows a ton more.
Right.
So I think there's a good population. Nothing like big cities like LA or whatever, but there's a decent population, I think. Although
Louisville's very interesting. I mean, again, if you look at the metropolitan area, it's just over 1 million people. But what's interesting about Louisville is you don't really realize what's all here until you dig into it, right? I mean, growing up, I never realized that there was a Filipino community here in the city. But now that I have a Filipino wife, I've been married for 25 years, but I see it all the time, right? Partially because it's kind of funny. I don't know what it is about Filipinos, but they can find themselves in a dense crowd, and they always find it's funny. I think my wife has met everyone here in Louisville who's Filipino, but keeps on meeting the ones who move in, right? It's just, they seem to attract to each other. But that's great. It's so have you had a chance? I mean, so you've been in the States for about 10 years, a little bit over 10 years. So how much traveling around the United States have you done?
Initially, when I came here, I only wanted to see New York City because that's all you see in the movies.
Oh yeah.
New York City. So I had to see. And for the longest time, I wanted to live in New York City because it reminds me of my hometown. Tall buildings, taxis everywhere, chaotic life, subways, and I also went to. family in Connecticut, so that's also where I went, and I also did the GE internship at Connecticut as well. Um, I've also been to New Orleans. We took a vacation there. Um, I've been to, for work, I've been to Seattle many times. I've been to San Francisco many times. I've taken, vacations in different areas of California. So I think there's still a lot of exploring to do in the US. It's such a huge place. You don't realize this until you move here, how big the state is. Like even I mean, the states on their own, like Texas, for example, you don't realize how huge Texas is until like you see it on the map, until you know, we were planning a trip in Texas, which I didn't end up going. And I was trying to find coffee places in Austin. And, I was looking on the map for coffee places downtown Austin and then comparing it as to like where everything else was. And everything else was so far. And I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea it takes 20 minutes of driving to get to a simple place. It is a huge country. I remember that even the first couple of months that I was here, my dad took us everywhere, basically. And one of the places he took us was I think it was a Walmart. And just standing in the middle of Walmart, like looking at the ceilings, it's just how big this place is. And there's like, there's chips and whatever next to clothes and next to ice cream and next to everything else. That's just crazy. We don't even have that kind of space to build a Walmart
Right.
in my city because it's so dense. So I've never seen that before. So there's still a lot to explore in the US, but I think I've been to decent amount of places. My favorite places used to be New York City. I still like it, but I like Seattle a lot. And I
Yeah,
like,
Seattle's a really neat city.
places, yeah, and places in California that's like, Santa Barbara, that is, not as busy as other. It's more like a vacation spot and it's close to the beach and it's good for chill. There isn't much to do there. I've been there multiple times. There isn't much to do really. It's just like a beach and a street. But it's good for a relaxing vacation. So yeah.
That's awesome. No, I was just curious. I mean, as you said, you really like Louisville. I was curious how much and I'm not saying, I mean, I love Louisville, right? But that's not normally what you hear from someone, right? That they and admittedly, especially someone younger, right? I mean, because you're still more mobile, right? You're not tied down yet. So no, that's awesome. So let's talk about the talks you're going to be doing at Code PaLOusa. So the first one, Kubernetes Operators, when and how, and I gotta admit, I had never heard of operators before. I don't do much in Kubernetes anyways. I mean, real quick, I mean, what are Kubernetes operators?
So, well, first of all, Kubernetes in general is a container orchestration platform. And basically, when you have a ton of containers, you kind of have to have a way to orchestrate them. If you have a cluster, where do these containers get launched and how do they get packed on the servers that you have, and so on and so forth. So Kubernetes is like the most well-known orchestration platform currently for containers. Kubernetes operators are basically a way to use the Kubernetes API to automate different types of work that you do related to Kubernetes. And this could be anything. Operator is basically replacing an operator, a person. For example, if you have to take backups of a database, that's something that an operator might do. So you would basically use Kubernetes API to do that for you, mostly based on events. So it's kind of like an event-based, consuming events and basically acting upon those events. The type of operator work that I've done is to basically create resources in AWS. For example, if a service needs an S3 bucket or something similar like that, an operator will do it for you instead of you having to go manually do it, or you having to go to basically launch a script that does it. It's kind of like an automated way based on reaction events, sort of a thing. And I think it's a very advanced topic. Even if you are using Kubernetes, you're probably not using operators. Most of the time, most people can get by using Kubernetes out of the box and they'll be fine. You don't need to. It's kind of like a niche topic that advanced users of Kubernetes do. And the funny thing about that is that I don't necessarily agree with the operator pattern. So that's gonna be an interesting talk where I'm like, I know I'm talking about this, but I don't necessarily advise you to do it. Because people will see in the talk that a lot goes through writing an operator, and most of the time, you don't really have a need for it. You can figure those needs out with other things, or Kubernetes platforms on different cloud providers do it for you. They manage Kubernetes platforms. So it is a niche topic. I think not a lot of people are doing any work with operators, but it's probably the next thing that Kubernetes community and platform is moving towards, unless something else happens or pops up. So I'm still debating how deep I want to go in this talk, or should it just be a general overview?
Sure.
Because obviously I want to keep the audience engaged and I want people to take something away from the talk. So I'm still thinking about it. We'll see what happens.
Well, I would express that you're not the biggest fan of it, right? There's nothing. I mean, because honestly, number one, that makes it more genuine, right? Like for example, I talk a lot. I mean, I'm a big fan of graph databases. I talk a lot about them. But one of the first things I say in almost all my talks is graph databases are not, I'm not saying this is your answer, rewrite all your databases using graph databases, because it is a niche database service that works for a certain purpose of databases. It doesn't work for all databases, right? Some databases, you're going to have worse performance if you go to a graph database, right? And I always, now, I mean, grant you, I do, where graph databases make sense, I really love them, right? But so the genuality actually, I think, really helps, right? And plus, I think it'll get, especially for people who are in the session, who maybe are, who already knew a little bit about it, and heard great things about it. I think you'll get some interesting questions from those. Because I'm like, wait a second, now, so what? Well, what about this? And what about that? Right? I mean, that's my advice, right? In that, because I think you'll actually have some good interaction with that because of that. Oh, cool. And sure enough, it's not. I'm shocked. We're 3 weeks away. You don't have your talk written with. And of course, that's a joke with speakers. Normally we don't. Just, I will say, don't do what I did once. I did this last year. I had so many new talks that all got picked, right? Because I wasn't expecting all these new talks to get picked. And I actually arrived at a conference and I hadn't even written the session yet. I had it all in my head, right? But I hadn't written the deck and all that type of stuff. Yeah. So I ended up spending almost the whole conference before that talk in my hotel room, building all. And again, like I said, it was all in my head. I knew what I needed to talk. I didn't really need the slides, but that sucked because I didn't get to experience the conference itself as much. So then your other talk, I had not heard of this before, and I need to look more into this. So the journey to cell-based architecture. So I mean, what is cell-based architecture?
This topic is very dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. I talk about this anytime I get a chance. If you ask people who interact with me that know me, they'll say she can talk about this for hours. And she does. So cell-based architecture is actually a term coined by Werner Vogel, CTO of AWS. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was at the first re:Invent I went to, the 2016, or actually wearing the hoodie for some reason. The 2000, it's a coincidence. 2016 reInvent, and that's the first one I went to, and he mentioned this concept. And this is basically the concept that AWS itself uses when they build their data centers, is to reduce blast radius. So the way and how you reduce blast radius, and the way you do that is with cell-based architecture. So in short, instead of having like a monolith architecture where everything is tied together, and everyone is on the same platform, and it's using the same database, using the same servers, you would just have smaller versions of that platform, but totally independent from each other. That way, if one of the cells get affected, only 10% of your customers are affected. And that's how AWS works, in the sense that there's multiple, what we call availability zones, which are one or two data centers that are in the availability zone, that make up an availability zone, that have separate floodplains and everything in case of a failure. And those are within a region. So you would have 3 availability zones, for example, within a region. Every one of those availability zones is multiple data centers. So that makes sure that if one of the data centers, for example, catches fire, and they're actually at like a great distance, enough distance from each other that it doesn't affect each other. If one of them catches fire, not one availability zone, not one region goes down. So obviously I've seen this from AWS in action, but I've also seen not using cell-based architecture at my last job, and the effects it had on the many outages I was on. I'm namely going to be talking about 2 major outages, and one of them basically took down all of our US environment. So that's all of our US customers. And Auth0 has very big customers like Atlassian and all that, Philips, Siemens, and all that kind of, even banks, different banks in Australia and all that kind of thing. So, I just want to, it's a pattern that I really like. And I think it, when you talk about it and you say it this way, it makes a lot of sense. But in practice, a lot of us don't really, implement this, whether that's because of technical depth, that's always has a role, or it's because for some reason we have the tendency, like engineers have the tendency to chain up dependencies together. So this depends on this, and it takes that thing down, and this thing is also down, and so on and so forth. So it's a pattern to promote high availability and resiliency, so that if you end up having an issue, you don't take your customer base down. Issues are inevitable, outages are inevitable. You see the biggest companies like GitHub and Cloudflare and AWS itself.
Oh no, we're losing her. We've gone 50 minutes without a disconnect problem. Well, let's see. Hopefully this will. It's weird. Again, I don't know if this is happening on my side. Interesting. I'm not getting my excellent sign here. Let me. This is taking a little longer. I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the call here. We're gonna call her back. All right, you're back. Yeah, we lost you there. Sure. No, I'm gonna turn my video off. Okay. I did this yesterday. So sure enough, I had disconnects yesterday. I turned my video off, and I didn't have any more disconnects. I'm not sure. I've got a gigabyte internet, but that sometimes doesn't seem to actually solve the problem. But all right, so So what I'm curious, I mean, I gotta admit, like I said, I had not heard of cell-based architecture before. But now I'm very intrigued. I mean, this is definitely down some of the mantras I live in. Uh, um, and here's, I think, a perfect example. I think a lot of my viewers are more on the Microsoft side. So, I mean, if you think you've been using Azure long enough, think about what happened 2 years ago when the South Central region went down. I don't know how much you know about that one, but basically they had a thunderstrike that took out the generators, or took out a key generator, which ended up affecting the air conditioning, and then so then the alarm systems noticed the temperatures going up, so start shutting down machines. Right, and so everything did what it was supposed to do. Well, not really, because they later found out that they manually had an override turned off. And that's actually why it caused such a problem. Azure has since gone to availability zones also. And that was one of the big, they had already started availability zones, but that really pushed them to do it more. Because like at that point, South Central did not have availability zones. But it was also like the headquarters of where Azure DevOps is. So everyone lost Azure DevOps for like a day and a half. Which was fun, trying to do your work when your source control system is out of the system. Like I said, I'm definitely gonna look into the cell-based architecture. I might become just as big as fan as you are, because that is, I mean, that's like I talk a lot about microservices, and it's for the same type of purpose, right? The idea of my biggest reason why I push them is that I don't want to take down a whole system just because this one little component went down, and I think that's the same idea you're talking about with the cell-based architecture. So that's neat, and it's cool that you talk about how much you love cell-based architecture, how you learned about it at reInvent, and now lo and behold you're working for AWS. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, is reInvent happening this year?
Yeah, so yesterday we announced that reInvent is.
Oh, I didn't know it was yesterday. I really didn't know it was just yesterday. No, okay, go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I interrupted you. I don't think you noticed I interrupted you, but go ahead.
Yeah, so reInvent is going virtual, and it's going to be over 3 weeks, and it's also going to be free.
Cool.
So it's very different than previous years when we usually do it in Vegas, but with COVID happening, we can't risk having that many people, together in one place.
So it's sure. It's funny. That was not a loaded question. I didn't know they just made an announcement yesterday. I just, if you didn't have the sweatshirt on, I might not even thought about it. So when is reInvent going to happen? You said over 3 weeks. Do you know when?
Yeah, usually it's end of November, throughout early December. So I think it's just going to be the same times again this year. I believe that we have it on the website, and I can get that real quick. So the website is reinvent.awsevents.com, and it's happening November 30th to December 18th.
Cool. Well, I mean, especially now it's free, I'll have to check some of that out too. It's, I always tell everyone, I mean, so like I spent a lot of time on Azure Functions, which is, of course, is the same thing as AWS Lambdas. And when I talk to people, I'm like, oh, well, in Lambdas, we can do this. Can you not do that in Azure? I'm like, we can't do it now, but give it a couple weeks and it'll have it. And guess what? When Amazon or when Azure announces something, Amazon will have it a couple weeks later too, right? It's interesting to watch the two compete. But no, awesome. So, so I'm curious. What do you like to do for fun outside of work?
I guess a lot of things. Like sometimes I feel like I don't even have enough time to do all my hobbies. I I like gardening. I find that to be very peaceful. When it's season to grow things, I'm always buying new plants. So I have a plum tree, I have fig trees that I'm growing, and they're not fruiting yet. But that takes somewhat time taking care of those plants. I like fitness, so I work remotely, so I'm sitting all the time.
Hmm.
When I worked downtown Louisville, I went for walks around downtown a lot, and that is not in my schedule anymore, unfortunately. So I have to make sure that, I keep active. So fitness, is a huge part um, of my hobbies. Like it takes about an hour or two per day. Um, I like to read a lot. I like working on side projects. The Most of the things I read about are related to networking and databases. Those are some of the topics I'm really interested to know every single detail I can know about them. So when I have free time, those are the things that I'm reading about. And I do try to work on my side project. It's a little bit, chaotic right now. Like I just, have a new job and have to like, do onboarding and get used to everything. So I haven't had enough time yet, but um, definitely side projects is a hobby that I like doing. And what else? This hobby, there's another hobby. I do painting and drawing and all that kind of things. But I haven't had enough time to do any of it. I'm supposed to do some paintings for our house because we have nothing on our walls. But I have not had the chance to do that. So that's another hobby I have.
I would say, yeah, you definitely do keep busy. But it's good. I mean, it was funny because I was listening to what you're saying. I mean, there's a bunch of tech stuff you like to do on the side, but you balance it out with other things you like to do, which is good. A lot of people in this industry are bad about that, right? And I'm really bad about it, right? I I do a lot of things on the computer, but
I'm the same way. Like I'm more inclined to do hobbies that are kind of like related to computers and my interest, but sometimes you just have to step away.
awesome. Well, it's been great talking to you for the last hour or so. I'm curious. Any closing thoughts you have?
Um, mm, Nothing really. I wanted to just say that um, the fact that we have this conference makes me really happy. I do want to see Louisville as like grow its tech scene.
Hmm.
And I try to help with that as well. I know I have a Go meetup that I need to get to. Again, I've been very busy, but I need to like schedule that as well and get it up and running. Um, but I really appreciate everyone you included in the tech community who uh, tries to keep you know these conferences and meetups and everything going because the past 3 years I worked at companies outside of Louisville, but I still feel a connection
Sure.
to Louisville because I had my first jobs here. Like people gave me a chance with I had no experience, but people in Louisville gave me a chance to work and get my career up and running. Um, so I do feel, something towards the fact that I have to give back to the community, and, kind of work on the tech scene and be involved. So I think it's amazing that this conference is up and running every year. Um, and I'm glad it's virtual and it's not canceled.
Yeah. No, I was determined some way somehow we were going to have a conference this year, especially with it being our
Yeah.
10th year, right? I mean, it just seemed wrong not to still have an event this year. Also, I appreciate that, and again, like I said, I'm so glad you joined us today, and more importantly, you'll be at Code PaLOusa. Definitely tell people check out your sessions. The reason why you're back is because I always get good reviews of your talks, and so really looking forward to those.